So, I recently lost my husband of 7 years to pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed 3 years ago, and 4 months back, he finally passed away. It's been difficult for me, and right now it has become even more difficult because I have had to cut off my stepdaughter too. That's what I'm here to talk about. So, a little about my relationship with my stepdaughter. She and I have had a very strained relationship right from the beginning. She has never liked me because when my husband introduced her to me, she was just 10 years old and still grieving the loss of her biological mother. My stepdaughter, Caroline, made it very clear that she did not like me. But even then, my husband and I got married after 2 years of dating. My husband and I hadn't even met until 3 years had passed since his ex's demise in an unfortunate accident. But still, for some reason, Caroline and her maternal grandparents, Bob and Marie, thought that it was too soon for my husband to have moved on. Naturally, none of them liked me. And since Caroline also spent a lot of time with her grandparents, she grew to dislike me even more with the backing of her grandparents. Unfortunately, it's not like we could cut Bob or Mary off because after his ex had passed away, they had been very supportive of him and had helped him raise Caroline while he was busy working, since he had been in between jobs when his wife had passed away. And his finances had also taken a serious hit, even with the survivor's benefits. So, whether he liked it or not, he was indebted to his in-laws, and we had to tolerate them. Besides, Caroline loved them, and we thought that it would be unethical and inhumane to snatch them away from her after they had just lost their daughter. I knew that they didn't like me, but I learned to put up with them as well because I knew all the history. And for what it was worth, I knew that my husband would always stand up for me and fight for me, be it with Caroline or with his in-laws. But his hands were tied. He couldn't do anything about the situation, so we just had to deal with it the best we could. After I had moved in with him, I had pretty much started fulfilling all the duties that a mother has. But Caroline was just never grateful for it. I tried my best to be understanding because I knew that she was going through a lot. These were new changes that she was experiencing, and obviously for a child, it was very difficult for her to deal with all this emotionally. Plus, on top of that, she had grandparents who were drilling it into her head that I was not a good person and that her father was wrong for moving on so quickly. I basically overlooked her behavior just because she was a child going through stuff. But as she grew older, it became more and more difficult for me to tolerate it. There would be frequent fights in the house just because Caroline refused to be respectful towards me, even though I had tried my best to be kind to her. My husband tried his best too, but eventually we just had to accept that she wasn't going to behave herself. No amount of threatening or scolding her worked. And she would constantly hit back at me, telling me that I was not her real mother, and intimidate her dad by telling him that she would speak to Bob and make him file for full custody of her. And then she would be taken away from him forever. It was all just really messed up, but thankfully, she seemed to calm down a bit around the time she started high school, probably because she was more into spending time with her friends than her family, so we were able to come to a place of indifference to each other. I still fulfilled all the duties of a mother, but I stopped expecting anything out of Caroline. And she stopped being outright hostile to me, but she was still very cold. I just figured that this was as good as it was going to get, so it was fine. Then, 3 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and our lives turned upside down. Because it was pancreatic cancer, one of the most dangerous forms, we started treatment immediately, and for a year he was able to work. But then he started falling sick, and eventually he had to quit his job. So I had to step up and start handling all the finances. Luckily, we had our savings to fall back on, and my in-laws were also very helpful while taking care of him. Insurance covered his treatment, but there were also a lot of out-of-pocket expenses that we had to deal with, including Caroline's tuition. Even though her father was suffering, she had decided that she was going to go to college out of state. We had tried to explain to her that money was tight. So we would be really grateful if she could go to college nearby, but she refused to compromise her education. It was really difficult for my husband to deal with that. So I just figured that I would handle the situation myself, and I told her that I would cover her tuition if she promised me that she was not going to create any trouble for her father because he was already suffering physically. I did not want him to feel emotionally hurt. And for that, I was willing to do whatever it took, even if it meant striking a deal with Caroline. She took me up on the offer, and just because I was in position, she decided that she was going to stay in an apartment near her campus instead of the on-campus accommodation that the college offers. So she wouldn't have to deal with all the rules and stuff and would be able to do whatever she wanted. After a lot of arguing and fighting, I finally gave in because I just didn't have the energy to deal with this drama. And thankfully, she held up her end of the deal as well. She did not create any more trouble for her father. And in fact, she was actually pretty nice to him afterward. I don't know if that was because of the deal or because she genuinely felt bad for her father. But whatever it was, it made my husband happy in his last few days because he thought that his relationship with his daughter was finally improving now. He never found out about the deal or about the fact that I was paying her tuition. He passed away knowing that it was Bob and Mary who were covering it all. It didn't make sense to bring it up to him because that would only hurt him. Anyway, it's been 4 months since he passed away, and on the day before his funeral, something very strange happened. Caroline had flown down here when his health started declining rapidly, and we figured that he was going to pass away anytime soon, so she could be there beside him in his last moments. A week later, he was gone, and for that 1 week, she had done her best to ignore me, and so had I. It was our usual routine, but then on the day before his funeral, she finally came up to me and broke down in my arms. I was already struggling emotionally because I had just lost the love of my life, and then when Caroline came to me, I ended up crying along with her. I don't know what happened to me. I just forgot everything that had happened in the past because at that moment, we were both just heartbroken. I thought that it was a real and genuine moment, but now I'm not so sure anymore. I'll come to that later, but anyway, after that incident, she started being more nice to me. In fact, after crying, she actually apologized to me for everything that she had put me through and told me that she had no right to behave that way. She told me that the deal didn't even matter to her. She was just scared of what was going to happen if nobody helped her out with the college because she really wanted to go to college out of state. And her only reason was that she wanted to be away from her father, who was slowly dying. She acknowledged the fact that she had been punishing me for something that was out of my control and told me that recently it had become even worse because she had been hurt, confused, and angry about everything that she was going through because she was about to lose a second parent and become an orphan. She was terrified of everything, and that's why she had been lashing out at me even more, forcing me to pay for stuff and then behaving badly with me just because she could. I tried to understand where she was coming from, and I told her that from now onwards, we could at least try to be friends. I told her that I was never trying to take the place of her mother. I never even would be able to, but the least we could do for each other was be good to one another, because that's what my husband would have wanted. And after that, she actually started changing her behavior. She was here for about 3 weeks after her dad's funeral because she went back to college. We have stayed in touch, and she flies back here every alternate weekend so she can meet me and I don't get too lonely. I thought that things were genuinely changing, but then last week I found a letter, and that just ruined everything for me. I had gone to her room for something while she was in the shower, and it was sticking out of her bag because she hadn't zipped it properly. Obviously, I instantly recognized my husband's handwriting, even though it was scrawled all over since he had written it when he was sick. I couldn't help myself, and I knew it was an invasion of her privacy, but I decided to take it out and read it. It was all crumpled and stuff, but I could still make out everything that was written. And basically in that letter, my husband had been addressing Caroline and had told her that he was glad she was trying to make amends with him while he was sick and putting aside all the past bad blood. The first paragraph was just about the two of them, but in the second paragraph, he said that just as she had decided to make amends with him, he wanted her to try and fix things with me too. He mentioned that after he had fallen sick and had to quit his job, he couldn't afford to save up for her. And even though Bob and Mary were willing to take care of her right now, they wouldn't always be around. Ultimately, she would need somebody to count on, and she couldn't just burn all her bridges and expect people to be there for her. So he advised her to make things right with me, and told her that after he was gone, he would really like for her to build an emotional connection with me as well, because I was a really good person. While all of that was pretty sweet of him to say, the only problem that I could see with the letter was that this particular paragraph about me had been very difficult to read because of the angry crosses all over it. One look at that part told me that she had obviously been pretty upset when she had been reading that letter, which is why she had then felt the need to start crossing it all out angrily. The paper was torn in certain places because of that. But in spite of crossing it out, she had still decided to come to me and follow her dad's advice. The only problem was, after reading that letter, I couldn't tell if she was trying to make it right with me because she wanted to, or because she had realized that now that her father was gone, she wouldn't have anybody to rely on financially. She already knew that she couldn't rely on Bob and Mary because they hardly had any money of their own. They were both just all bark and no bite. But my husband didn't know that, which is why he had mentioned them in his letter. And my in-laws, kind-hearted as they are, definitely cannot afford to take care of anybody in the future because they've already spent a lot of money, and I'm very grateful to them for it. But their finances have also taken a serious hit. They're both retired, so I'm guessing that doesn't help either. Caroline must have done the math as well, which is why she decided to come to me, or at least that's what I think. And I know for a fact that my husband did not have any bad intentions while writing her that letter, mostly because it wasn't actually true. My husband had not passed away without leaving anything behind for his daughter. We had a joint will, and the contents are going to be disclosed to the beneficiaries once both of us pass away. I'm still around, luckily, so Caroline has no idea that my husband still has some money put aside for her that had been left over after paying off all the other expenses. It's not an insane amount, but it's still something significant, along with her mother's jewelry. I've also left some stuff for her in the will, but that's just because I don't have anybody else to leave it to, since my parents and I are not particularly close. I don't have any siblings, and neither am I close to any of my friends. But Caroline has no idea about any of that. She thinks that her father left her nothing. And after I read that letter, I figured that that was the reason why she was being so nice to me all of a sudden. The timing was pretty suspicious because I was sure that she must have received that letter from her father shortly after he passed away. Knowing my husband, he probably had his lawyer pass it on to her to attempt to drive her to me, and then we could make things work between us. But the angry cross marks all over just that one paragraph, that's what just ruined it for me. And after she came out of the shower, I confronted her about it. And I told her that I wasn't comfortable with her staying with me anymore, and I wanted her to leave right then. She was very confused for a second, but then I showed her the letter that I had found, and she started explaining that when the lawyer had handed over that letter, she had just been extremely upset. She was horrified that she would have to rely on me for money forever because her father hadn't left her anything, and for that, she would have to make it up to me. But with time, she came to terms with it and decided to make things right with me, and that's why she had approached me the day before the funeral. She acknowledged the fact that initially she had been trying to get on my good side because of the money, but now she has genuinely developed a connection with me and felt sorry about everything that she had done. So she begged me not to kick her out, but I told her that I needed some time to think about things because what I had found out was a bit shocking for me. I needed some time to process things, so I told her that I wanted her to stay with Bob and Mary until her flight the next day. She started crying and telling me that she really didn't want to leave me, that she was honestly sorry about everything, but obviously, after everything that had happened in the past, it's very difficult for me to trust her. I felt really betrayed all of a sudden, and I told her that I needed time and I couldn't argue with her because that letter had really thrown everything off for me. So after a little while, when I didn't reply to her while she was crying, she decided to pack her things and leave. But she hasn't stopped trying to contact me, even though she has gone back to college. The reason is that I figured out a very simple way to find out whether she was trying to make things right with me just for the money or because she actually wanted to. I took 2 days to think about what I wanted to do, and then I responded to her, telling her that I was ready to forgive her, but from now onwards, she would have to arrange her own money to pay for her tuition and rent. To put it simply, I was cutting off her funds, and it was basically a test. So far, she hasn't been doing well because she's been begging me not to do this to her, even though it's not even that bad. She just has 2 more years to go before she gets her degree, so unlike most students, she's not even going to have to cover her own tuition for 4 years. A lot of people work their way through college. It's possible if they really try hard, and if she wants to, she can put in that hard work and prove to me that she's not trying to make things right with me just for the money. She still has no idea that her dad hadn't been telling her the truth in that letter, and I don't plan on telling her anytime soon. But after receiving almost 1,000 messages from her in the span of the past week, I've started to doubt myself. She's been trying to tell me that she honestly doesn't care about the money, but she also needs me to cover her tuition because she's already been pretty stressed out after her dad passed away. She can't take on the additional stress of covering her own tuition and rent and working through college right now. I don't know what to think. I've also been thinking about how manipulative what I'm doing right now is. It's not like I was having an easy time after my husband passed away. This is making everything even worse for me emotionally. I'm lost. I don't know what to think of myself. AITA for refusing to cover my stepdaughter's tuition and rent after my husband passed away. Edit. I've been noticing a lot of hate comments against my late husband because of the letter that he wrote. I don't know what to tell you guys, but after spending so many years of my life with him, I can assure you people that his intentions were not bad. Yes, he did make it sound like Caroline should just make it up to me because I have the money to take care of her, and Bob and Mary won't be around forever. But I know that he didn't actually mean it that way. He was just trying to show her the practical side of things. And in my original post, I also mentioned that he had said that I'm a wonderful person. He did tell her to try and build an emotional connection with me as well, but he knows that she's a practical person, which is why he highlighted the bit about the money. It was quite sneaky of him to make it look like he had left nothing for her when it was true, but he was just looking out for both of us after he was gone. I'm sure it couldn't possibly have been easy for him because he knew that he was going to leave behind his daughter as an orphan. I didn't mention this in my original post because I did not think it was relevant, but he had also expressed how apologetic he felt because for him, I had to give up the idea of having more kids because we were having a lot of trouble with Caroline as it is. To be honest, I didn't mind the idea of not having more kids. I hadn't been one for marriage or kids in the first place, but that changed when I met my husband. He knew that, but even then, he had told me that he felt bad about leaving me behind with nobody to support me, since if we had children of our own, at least they would have tried to be there for me. But I just had Caroline, who hated me, which is why I know that he only had our best intentions at heart when he had been writing that letter. He just wanted to get Caroline to apologize to me and fix things with me somehow. So I'm not going to hold him responsible for anything. Whatever is going wrong right now is because of Caroline's behavior in the past. She apologized and I did forgive her, and we had a good thing going on for a while, but then the history that we have cannot be erased all of a sudden. And no matter how hard I try, I can't get all the doubts out of my head, especially not after I saw how angrily she had crossed out that paragraph from the letter. I don't know how much bitterness and resentment she had within her, that she couldn't even stand the fact that her father had said good things about me. So much so that she felt the need to do something about it physically and cross that paragraph out. Anyway, I've done whatever I had to do. And I would just really appreciate it if people did not target my husband here now. That's all that I really wanted to say. Thank you. Update 1. Hi, it's been 2 weeks since I posted. I have spoken to my parents. I've spoken to a couple of my friends about whatever I'm going through. And of course, I've also read the comments here. Initially, I was skeptical about speaking to my loved ones about this because I didn't want them to think badly of me, since I thought I was being extremely manipulative and evil. But then I realized I didn't want to suffocate myself under this burden either, so I opened up, and they actually told me that what I was doing was actually pretty reasonable. If she really wanted me to be a part of her life, she would understand where this was all coming from. She would get that in the past she has been nothing but horrible to me, even up until recently. So naturally, it's not that easy for me to forget about everything and start again. And that letter, especially, she never told me about it either, obviously. She had been very upset when she had read that. So without doing all of this, there is really no way for me to know if she's being genuine with her apology and her behavior, or if it's just because she wants financial support from me. My parents and friends told me that I needed to stick to my guns, so that's what I did. I reached out to her and told her that I was really sorry that this had turned out this way, but I was not changing my mind. Now, if she really wanted me in her life, and to make amends, she would have to work her way through college like everyone else does, or she could just take out a student loan with somebody's help. But either way, she would be looking out for herself now. If she wanted to, I was ready to be there for her emotionally and support her like that. But financially, I was not going to be doing anything for her. If she was ready to accept that, that would be great. And if not, well, then I would know where I stood with her. I sent that message to her after a lot of deliberation, and it's been 5 days since then, and I haven't heard back from her. She's supposed to fly back here this weekend, and I'm the one who gets the flight tickets, but this time I haven't done that. So let's see if she bothers coming back this time to speak to me or not, since that is going to decide the future of our relationship. I know she has some money of her own. She gets an allowance from Bob and Mary. It's the bare minimum that they do for her. It's not much, but I know that she saves. Anyway, let's see what happens after this. Update 2. So she did come back home and paid for the flight ticket herself as well. She showed up at the house after returning from the airport, and she was in tears as soon as I opened the door. When she started crying, she immediately hugged me, and I didn't know what to say. I felt pretty emotional too, because, of course, this has been a really difficult time for all of us. Losing my husband has been hard on everyone involved, especially the two of us, so I decided to let her in. And even though I had made up my mind that I was not going to let her talk me into going back on my word, I thought that at least I would give her a chance to speak to me. So we sat together and we spoke our hearts out. She told me that for the past 5 days, she had just been thinking about how to talk to me because she knew for a fact that what I was doing was not that unreasonable. In fact, the fact that I had even forgiven her in the first place was shocking, after how badly she had treated me all these years. It was normal for me to be suspicious of her, given the fact that she had taken out her anger on the letter, especially the paragraph about me. After having seen that, anybody in their right mind would have their doubts. So she couldn't even blame me for doing what I did. But at the same time, she also felt like everything was falling apart. The past couple of days had been very difficult for her, but ultimately she had been able to come to terms with the fact that what I was doing was maybe not the best thing for her, but it was definitely the best for me. And she couldn't hold that against me because so far I had always done everything in my power to make sure that everyone around me was happy. I deserved this, and so did she. She told me that she hadn't replied in the past 5 days because she needed time to think about what she wanted to say and how she wanted to put it. So she had waited until we were in person just so we could communicate better. And now that she had told me what she wanted to do, I offered to help her out until she found a job, and came clean to her that her father had actually not been completely honest in the letter. I told her that he actually had left some money for her so she could use that until she found something, but she refused, saying that she needed to do this on her own. I was actually kind of proud of her for coming to this realization on her own, and we spent the weekend peacefully. And hopefully the next time that she comes home, she'll have some interviews lined up. I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping for the best. Update 3. Hi, so it's been 3 days since my last post, and today Bob and Mary called me up and started cursing at me out of the blue. They started accusing me of being selfish and told me that I had no right to keep all the money to myself, and forced Caroline to get a job to pay for college. I tried to tell them that I didn't force her to do anything. I even offered to help her out with the money that her father had left her until she found a job. But they just kept screaming at me. So I just hung up and blocked. And then I called Caroline to figure out what was going on, because this was unexpected. I didn't accuse her of anything. I was just curious. After speaking to her, I realized that she had just mentioned the fact that she was looking for jobs to them, very casually, because she had decided that she was going to cover her own expenses. They had offered to increase her allowance, but she refused, saying that she needed to do this on her own. Obviously, she was trying to become a better person But Bob and Mary didn't take it that way. They instantly jumped to the conclusion that I must have forced her into this and are currently demanding that I help her out, just like I have been for the past 2 years. I don't think that I owe them an explanation for this. This is between me and Caroline, and if she's fine with this arrangement, I don't care what they think about this. So I'm keeping them blocked, and Caroline has told me that she's really sorry about the misunderstanding and that she's going to try and get them to apologize to me. But I told her not to bother because I don't even want them to speak to me. Anyway, at least this is not going to affect my relationship with Caroline since it's just started getting better. As for Bob and Mary not speaking to me again, I honestly couldn't have asked for anything better. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.